Hello there, people and listeners of the Hungry Podcast. Today, I'm utterly thrilled and very, very grateful to welcome Miles Hopper onto the podcast. Miles is the co-founder of Mindful Chef, who make insanely delicious recipe boxes. I actually had one the other evening. It was absolutely gorgeous. I'm sure we all know Mindful Chef. They really kind of have challenged the recipe box category. They've had huge success selling part of the business to Nestle in November 2020. They've worked with some amazing people. Ben Fogle and Fern Cotton are big advocates of the brand, and even have a kind of an illustrious list of celebrities who have invested, Tom Daley and Andy Murray. So thank you so much for coming on, Miles. I really appreciate it.
Nice. Thanks for having me, Dan. It's great to chat to you.
So where I always try and start these conversations is I like to rewind back to the super kind of nascent stages of every brand or every founder I interview. And doing some research for this, I've read numerously that, in 2015, yourself, Giles and Rob were on a fishing boat in the Exeter estuary, and you're sort of bringing back this fresh fish. And this was where kind of the idea for Mindful Chef kind of really began to bubble in your mind, at least. But then what you've said on numerous podcasts, which I found really interesting, you said yourself and Giles would meet in London for lunches and discuss various business ideas that weren't Mindful Chef. Out of sheer curiosity, I'd love to know some of the ideas that didn't that didn't make the table pre-Mindful Chef.
Yeah, sure. So I'd say, all three of us really. Actually, Rob also involved, and we're all from the same school but slightly different ages. So went away and did our own things, and then sort of came back. But also similar ages, you'd always sort of spend time together, outside of school, whether it's playing sports or going on holidays, all those sorts of things. Some of the other ideas, far simpler than a fresh food company. They're all the sort of ones which you come and seen like sort of have been relatively successful. I guess like the best examples probably like the online delivery of razor blades or razor sort of kits, and you think, oh, if you've done that, and you see some of the examples that have done exceptionally well, you think, well, that might have been a bit easier to sort of shift and lift rather than 1.5 million or sort of 1.5 million ingredients going through a warehouse every single week and having to go in and out. It's a lot easier to probably store some razor blades in some boxes and send them out as and when needed.
And so what made you guys pick the harder challenge? Because in my mind, I was like, fair play. Like they always say, take the path of least resistance. You've in many respects taken the path of most resistance. What was the why in Mindful Chef versus the other businesses?
I think it's really about getting behind something you can be passionate about. So, we've always been growing up in Devon. We're very lucky that we've always had access to great food and seen it on our doorsteps through friends or fantastic suppliers. You don't have to go very far on a walk to see some farms, or whether you're walking along the estuary like we do most days, and you see the fishermen going out on their boats and things like that. So really, we've always had sort of a sort of connection with food, and then really it was our passion around sort of healthy eating as well, and a healthier lifestyle. And that sort of stems from my background actually being involved in health and nutrition, and then from Rob and Giles's sort of viewpoint, I think they've always been very active, always been outdoors, etc. And really it was a pain point for them. And so it was actually, if we could solve this pain point for a lot of people, you can get a razor blade fairly easily yourself. Actually, convenience of having it ordered online, don't get me wrong, it's great, but it's not hard to do it yourself. Whereas actually eating healthily week in, week out is really difficult for a lot of us. And actually being able to solve that problem, we realized, okay, maybe we can have a truly sort of positive impact on a lot more people. So I think that's probably why we sort of centered around this idea more and really wanted to push it. But don't get me wrong, also it's probably the naivety of going, well, how hard can it be? Just go give it a go.
Sure.
You realize pretty quickly, it's a lot harder than you thought.
No, I love that. And I think it's, I suppose for listeners, most listeners to this podcast are all challenger brands. And I think a lot of people can often look for the easy path, but if that doesn't ignite that passion internally, then yes, it may be easy, but if you haven't got that hunger, the more hunger you've got, the more passion you've got, the easier it is to kind of push through obstacles, I suppose. And again, listening to podcasts, is that there was this stage, and I think it's amazing, and I've completely taken my hat off to you, but you'd say you're going around Devon trying to get these farmers to basically sell you like 3 chicken breasts, 2 steaks, and like 10 pieces of kale. And you said, I think it was on the Firm Cotton podcast, you know, they just laugh in your face. And I kind of want to unpack, one, the resilience you yourself, Giles and Rob have got, and 2, almost your persuasive techniques, because I think everyone is going to have to be able to sell and persuade. It's like, it's just mandatory in everything we're trying to do. So when these farmers were kind of laughing in your face, like, how did you stay resilient in that moment and be like, actually, no, we're just going to keep going? Because I think listeners will really appreciate this.
Yeah, I mean, when we say laugh in your face, it doesn't come across as harshly, I think, as that can sound. I think it was more jovial, you know, sort of,
sure,
as your connections are, and these individuals are. They're not you know, negative people out to get you. It's sort of that connection, I guess, and rapport. I guess it comes back to that point about being passionate about what you're doing, really. And as entrepreneurs, first and foremost, you're going to have to be like, an element of your personality is going to have to sell, you know, or your job role is going to have to be to sell, as much as we actually, lots of us don't enjoy doing it necessarily, and is one of the first things you might look to see if you can get support on. But when you have a product as interesting as food, I think you know, it's one of the most shared sort of pieces of content on the internet. It's one of the biggest things people can get passionate about and speak about. Why I love it is because it creates conversation around the dinner table. And if you ever go somewhere and you don't know somebody, but you're sat down having dinner together, you can instantly build a rapport talking about the amazing sort of flavors, ingredients, recipes, dinners you're sort of eating. So that's what I love. And I think, yeah, you know, when we did go around, you had some of the sort of farmers laugh in your face and go, this just isn't really worth my time. It's, you know, speaking passionately about, well, this is our plan, this is why I think it's big, this is how we can help you as well. Actually, you know, the whole idea was actually, can we pay our suppliers like a sort of a better rate than what they were getting from maybe some of the bigger players in the market, and how the traditional model had been done. So I think, you know, a lot of them thankfully did take a bit of a punt and go, okay, it might be a bit more effort and time than it's really worth right now, but I like these guys, and, you know, I like what they're trying to do and believe in the idea, I guess, as well. And yeah, and sort of would package and send out a couple of steaks or a couple of jiggle breast in the early days when it probably wasn't worth their time, but thankfully they did.
I love that. And I think what you said there, I suppose you've answered the question about how to be persuasive. It's kind of like, one, if you're passionate, and then you couple that with focusing on the pain point of whether that's for the mindful chef consumer or the farmer or the retailer. I think those are kind of the 2 pillars of, I suppose, selling. And when you said you felt uncomfortable at selling, I know for a fact so many listeners to this will get petrified. I mean, I used to get so petrified speaking to buyers, like literally petrified. Would you be able to speak to that? Like, how did you kind of overcome that fear? Was it repetition or?
Yeah, I mean, when I say that, I mean, my background obviously in health and things, and I was a personal trainer for the best part of 10 years. So one of the first things you have to do, what people don't realize, is they think it's all about health and training and just getting to train people all day. Actually, the first thing you've got to do is find people to train. So actually you're thrown straight into the sort of lion's den of gym floors of actually trying to sell yourself and sell your own business. So I sort of had some background there of being able to do it, but it's exactly as you say. I think it's all around repetition, and it's about getting out, not being afraid to hear no. Like, that's the best people, best salesmen in the world. They don't mind hearing no. You know, they don't take it as a negative sort of point. They actually use it more. They have that sort of growth mindset to go, okay, well, how am I actually going to take that no and either persuade this person another way, or how am I actually going to use it to change my approach in my next conversation with somebody else? So actually, I think you can learn from that, but really it is, as you say, it's about repetition. It's about learning and listening to people. What is their response? What are they saying to you? How can you change your approach? How can you change your tack, etc., etc. But repetition is the most important thing.
No, definitely. No, and I think as well, because I suppose for us at the beginning at Money Life, I'll just go in and be like, this peanut butter tastes amazing. And that was the passion bit. But in terms of the actual pain point, the retailer's like, why do I need this? And it took us a long, long time to understand, to almost speak in their language. I love that. I love that, Miles. And you referenced at the beginning of this conversation that one of the advantages was that obviously 3 co-founders, all from the same school. But there must be this unfair advantage in being different year groups, is what I kind of am getting. What would you say that unfair advantage is? Because I think, again, lots of listeners may be in co-founder partnerships, and you kind of hear these stories from the graveyard where it doesn't work. I'd love to know the advantage of the different year groups.
Yeah, I guess, so if I answer that in 2 ways, like one around the age point and then one around co-founders in general. Like, awesome. Co-founders in general, we're like big advocates, because if you're a single founder, like, you know, hats off to you, because it's incredibly hard and can be, I imagine, incredibly isolating and lonely at certain times. And the best thing I would say is try and get yourself a mentor in that situation, because actually being able to talk to someone regularly or just have them listen to you, or even potentially offer advice, is sort of is invaluable. And with co-founders, especially myself, Giles, and Rob, you know, we have 3 very different skill sets as well, which is really complementary to the business. So we don't tread on each other's toes a lot either. So, you know, Rob, he comes from a financial background, so incredibly good with numbers. He really focused on sort of the operational side of the business, where he sort of excels. Giles, his background's always been in marketing, so, you know, and brand, so he's been really focused on that. And then my background, health and nutrition, but equally sort of very much people focused, so more centered, moved away from the marketing and brand over the last sort of year or 2, and actually more into a community focused role around our sort of customer care, our community, both internally, externally, and then sustainability, etc. as well. So, you know, the 3 different personalities can work really well across the business and sort of lend our sort of skills into those areas. And then to your point around sort of ages and why is that beneficial, that wasn't something we thought about beforehand. It was just purely out of, okay, we've spoken about doing some things, where are our skill sets, where are our passions, etc. And actually they just sort of came together and formed Mindful Chef at the right time. It probably could have been done with a couple of different people actually, potentially, but maybe the skill sets or what people were doing just weren't lining up. But what it really allows, I guess, is we are very good friends, but equally, potentially we're not best friends, and we have best friends outside of this sort of our group day-to-day life. I actually generally, though, speak to Rob and Giles more than anyone else, sure. Equally at the same time. But, you know, I think that allows us the thing of, if you are potentially going to meet others outside of work, you're not always around those people as well. So you've always got the level of separation from it, so you can sort of get away. Whereas I think if you starting things with best friends, probably some of the stories you're mentioning is you probably are always in each other's pockets due to the very nature of work in a startup like growth sort of business, where you're constantly having to talk to one another. And then if you're also seeing each other at the weekends nonstop, etc., and you know, we all have those ups and downs in these businesses, then I imagine, yeah, it gets a bit more stressful, or the sort of pressure gets piled on a bit more if you're constantly in each other's pockets as well.
It's so interesting. And I think as kind of trying to look it through a lens of Money Life, when we go for our team sort of piss ups, I suppose, is we've almost now got to make a rule of we don't talk about work, because before you know it, it's an even longer meeting, because you're just talking about boom, 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 boom. And I think, I suppose for listeners, because sometimes it's husband and wife, which I don't know how people do that. That is, to me, like, again, commend you massively. But I think having this separation, or putting in these boundaries of when we discuss work and play, I suppose you've got to have the two to sort of to balance each other out. And I suppose, and this maybe don't have to give us too much on this, but I'd love to know, like, has there been a potentially, not a bust up, but has there been maybe some conflict of interest between you 3 on the journey, like a really sparkling moment that you can remember? And I'd love to know, like, 1, how you resolve that conflict, and 2, how, like, are there any systems you put in place to make sure you were making the right decision for Mindful?
Yeah, Plenty is probably the first answer.
Amazing.
You know, but the good thing is you got 2 versus 1, so you can always come to a conclusion or a result at the end of it. Look, I think we built Mindful Chef, you know, from 3 friends, and our first customers and team members were family and friends. So one of our biggest values at Mindful Chef is actually being personal and trying to maintain that as we continue to grow. So I think, bearing that in mind, we expect people to bring their like real selves to work, and we expect people to really say what's on their mind, and communicate it properly, because it's better to have everything out in the open and actually, you know, lay all your cards on the table and be able to actually come to a good decision that everyone's happy with. Even if you don't necessarily agree, at least you've managed to voice your opinion and sort of what you might want to do. So with that in mind, I guess, yeah, we've constantly had, you know, issues where we don't necessarily agree as a trio, or potentially one of us or 2 of us want to go down one route and, you know, somebody else doesn't. Also can happen with hires with other team members, etc., where personalities can clash or ways of working can clash, which is sort of accentuated or magnified, I think, in startup environments where you're generally working, you know, in a small room probably, and, you know, you just have clashes. Like, business moves at such a fast pace. So there's been lots of different examples over the years where we've all clashed, and then, you know, like as I said, 2 versus 1 generally wins. But how we sort of stop that now and sort of looking further ahead for the business? Well, actually, probably I think it was about 4 years ago now, maybe a bit more actually, 4 or 5 years ago, we actually brought an individual into the company to come and do a project for us, work on our prepared sort of frozen range, because we didn't have any experience, and thought, actually, rather than just giving it a go, which we could have done, we thought actually it's probably more intelligent now to bring somebody in with a big experience, so we can move it a bit quicker, and get them out to our customers. And actually we saw how this individual worked with the team, saw how they interacted, and actually thought, okay, they do a really good job. How about they potentially become our sort of CEO and lead the company? Because we don't mind bringing in really smart individuals around us to help, as long as it's going to like benefit the company. We've always done that from the beginning. And actually at that point, we really wanted to focus in on those sort of different channels, as I sort of explained earlier, for myself, Giles and Rob, and focus on our real skill sets, rather than sort of getting involved in every single area of the business, which all sort of entrepreneurs and founders will do. So, and in order to do that, you need to have somebody else at the helm who can sort of go, okay, no, you need to focus on this. This individual will focus here, don't worry. So I actually brought in Tim as our CEO probably about 4 years ago, which a lot of startups don't do. And we had a lot of questions around, why would you want to do that? Why would you sort of relinquish that level of control, if you will? But we don't see it like that. It's very much a working partnership between ourselves and Tim, and actually the rest of the sort of leadership team anyway. And actually what it's really allowed us to do is stop necessarily having those sort of, you know, 2 versus 1 scenarios, or rather than it being super opinionated, it's actually more of a strategic focus for the business.
No, there's I mean, there's so much to jump in on that, because I think I was going to ask you about Tim anyway, and we'll go to that in a sec. But what you said there about you know, one of our values is being personal and bringing your real selves to work. Now, I love values. I think they are that sort of the linchpin and the pillars of building great brands. But I think actually manifesting the values on a day-to-day basis is not always I mean, you can put them on a bloody wall, but it's not like there's actually bring them to life is really hard for brands. How do you what's the how? Like, how do you encourage Mindful Chef employees to bring themselves to full selves to work, and really, if they disagree with something, like encourage that? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, it's really hard. It's a lot easier when you're smaller, like, and everyone's bought in, like really heavily bought into the mission for one reason or another. You know, you're not paying the salaries they're used to, so they're joining. You know, if they're joining as part of the mission, and they've really bought in. Whereas when you get a bit bigger and you probably have a bit more financial resource, you're probably paying a bit closer to what they might normally expect elsewhere. So, you know, you're still trying to get people in who really do buy into that mission, but equally there's always that sort of seesaw balancing act. But for us, I mean, when we were similar size to what Life is, maybe a bit smaller, actually about 11 people, we took the whole team away and we said, right, this is what we think about the company, and these individuals have been with us for a couple of years and for the life and sort of soul of Mindful Chef. And we said, but rather than telling you what we think our value should be, what do you really think they should be as well? So did like a sort of a day where we worked with them, went to like Lululemon's like head office, did like yoga, had brunch, then all sat around and sort of did it with sort of a brand guru who was on our board at the time. So it worked really well, actually. And we came up with the 3 values being mindful, personal, and unafraid, which fit in with Mindful Chef really well. But as you say, as you get bigger, it gets harder and harder to sort of build that into everyone's sort of weekly or daily habits, isn't the right word, but just sort of way that they think about work, I guess. And how do we ensure people do bring their real selves to work? I think it's just ensuring that they have channels of communication and areas that they can voice things. I mean, we really champion our values. So at the end of every quarter, you can nominate anyone in the business who you think has lived or breathed the value for one reason or another. And we'll have, you know, a list of about 50 individuals, which will come back from peers around the business. And then myself, Giles, Tim and Rob will actually go through them all and we'll go, okay, well, who do we think should like win it this quarter? And then we'll call them all up in like a big meeting, or when we go to, I don't know, summer party, Christmas party, etc. And then we'll tell everyone why this individual might have won, you know, being unafraid, or what they've done. What does that really mean for the business? What does that mean for the individual, or etc. And that's a really nice way to sort of bring it to life and call it out. And then there's other things like, you know, as I said, like being unafraid in the early days, you know, just going, okay, let's give it a go. It's fresh food. How hard can it be? You know, taking on the big boys, all those sorts of things. How do we get people to think like that as you get bigger? You know, they might come from more corporate backgrounds, etc., where there's specific ways of working, and actually you want them to sort of take on that real growth mindset, startup sort of attitude. And I guess we run things like, you know, feast of failure sort of sessions, where Giles is actually running one sort of next week or week after, where he's going to take the whole team through, you know, sort of like a working group. So he'll go, well, here's some of the things we failed on in the past, like tell us some of yours, etc., etc. And hopefully we get that sort of communication where people aren't afraid to talk about it, and then actually you get some of these sort of positive points of how people managed to deal with it or how they moved on post that sort of session.
That's so interesting. And so was that feast of failure?
Yes, yeah,
that is brilliant. Yeah, that sounds like, yeah, I'd probably have a lot to say at that feast. And what because again, doing the research, you guys are growing at such like a ravenous pace. What is the actual size of the team now total?
So this team is probably about 130, I think, sort of head office and managers. And then we have a sort of we work in a hybrid model with our packer. So we'll have our managers up in the warehouse, and then sort of all the team that pack the boxes, actually they're employed by our sort of third party packer. So about 130 in the Mindful Chef team though, and then we've got a fantastic team and our partners who pack all the boxes.
That's mental, because I think there's like 17 at Life. I'm like, oh my god, we're huge. 130, that's crazy. And you said the brand guru at Lululemon, who was that, and why did he or she, like, what sort of wisdom did they espouse on Mindful? I'd love to kind of explore that.
So I mean, that was he's actually our board member. So he's actually called Leslie Butterfield. So big history and background in brand and advertising, and actually he's a sort of a family acquaintance of Giles's, who in the very early days, this is something else we did that not many people do, is after about 6 months of sort of trading and gaining some momentum, we needed a bit of money because it was all self-funded, and you know, we were getting to that point of should we go and look for some, or what should we do? And actually thought, okay, well, should we set up a board? Because actually we've got, as I said, there's 3 of us, and you know, we constantly talk about which direction to go. And actually potentially by setting up a board, we can get a bit more wisdom and really focus on our direction, strategic approach. And actually, at that time, Giles said, well, I know this individual. He could be really good. We met with him. We thought, okay, this would be a fantastic person to bring onto the team. And so we added Leslie and then a couple of other sort of angel investors who were involved in the health and wellness industry at the time, who could offer a bit of advice from that sort of angle. And so actually we had a board set up, within the first sort of 6 to 8 months of trading. And actually that really allowed us to focus on our proposition and not pivot to, or, it's the word everyone likes to use, pivot too early or try and do something else when times are hard and maybe you aren't quite getting the traction, but really focusing on your USP, on your product and your customers.
I love that. And so Leslie's background, you said, what sort of brands did he work with?
So he was at Interbrand. So actually worked on the whole sort of wealth campaigns, but sort of I guess his biggest one was he helped sort of New Labour get into power with Tony Blair at the time, etc., etc. So an exceptionally knowledgeable individual who we were extremely lucky to bring on board in the early days, and actually has been with the business ever since. So yeah, fantastic person to have as part of the team. Really helped us sort of over the years.
No, I love that, because every guest I interview always has mentors. So obviously, you're going to be a mentor to everyone listening to this, but I always find it interesting to sort of unpack the lessons from your mentors. What would you say has kind of been the most salient piece of wisdom Leslie's passed on to you guys?
Well, I mean, he was global chief strategy officer at Interbrand, so he's like the top of the top, and sort of anything Leslie sort of tells you or piece of advice, you listen pretty intently. But equally, there's also things that you might disagree on, because just the nature of startups, fast-paced, being in a very new category of D2C, online food, etc. But I think it really comes down to strategy and customers with Leslie. He's exceptionally passionate about understanding your customers and their interaction with the product, and are you really dealing or solving the problem? And I think in regard that really made us focus. Like I said, don't change your product too early. Don't just go and try and sell them something else that they don't particularly want. Really understand your customers, get under the skin of them, talk to them. We even nowadays we'll still ring up customers, but in the very early days it was ringing up the 100 we had every week or whatever, and going, right, what do you think? Can I have 5 minutes of your time? Can I talk to you? Let me understand how you're using this, what you like, what you dislike, what could we do better? All of these sorts of things which people really don't want to do necessarily, because it's hard and might not necessarily be the best at speaking or thinking, I don't really want to ring up a customer and bother them on 7 p.m. or whatever, or their lunch break. But if you can build that rapport with them in the early days, then actually they don't mind, and actually you can find out a lot of really useful information that can sort of help you determine which path you take moving forward.
No, I love that. I suppose what I'm garnering from this conversation is you guys often take the path of most resistance, but that is usually the path which has the greatest, or reaps the greatest benefit. And I think with calling those, there's this article, I think it's called 1,000 True Fans, by Kevin Kelly. And it's if you can turn all you need is 1,000 customers who absolutely love your product, and then they'll tell, and it kind of has this spiral effect. And I think for anyone listening to this, and we should probably do this at Money Life as well, is getting to know your customers on a more human level is so powerful.
And it's a lot easier to sell 1,000 customers a lot more than it is to go your 1,000 best customers who absolutely love you, rather than it is to go and find 10,000 more customers who might like you, might not. So if you can really look after your best customers. And that's why we place a big emphasis on, the 3 values as well, and especially being personal. We have a closed Facebook community of about 20,000 customers, I think, and they're your super fans who absolutely love the brand, and they put their pictures up every day of the food, talk about it. They go and do the community events, all those sorts of things, and they know individuals in the team by name. And I think it's about actually building that personal connection, which we were really conscious about in the early days. That's why we put Miles and Giles as the face. That's why we would actually ring up customers. It's a lot easier just to send an email, but actually ring up, go and do the events, meet people in person, build that rapport, and then actually, like you say, you can understand a lot more, and equally it can be quite beneficial for the business in the long run as well.
No, definitely. And I think, so with the Facebook group, how were you kind of building that two-way conversation, if that makes sense?
I guess it's as you get bigger, you sort of need to find a more scalable option other than the yoga brunches, which we run on weekends for customers, the supper clubs, the cooking classes. We actually had a cooking class last week, which was really cool after, a couple of years of not being able to run any with some of our sort of top customers. But I think a lot of people are looking for personal connections these days. They're looking for communities like that they can interact with. And the Mindful Chef one is just quite a nice one actually to be involved in, because you get to talk about food. Like I said, we're solving a real pain point for people in terms of making healthy eating easy. So actually you have a lot of amazing stories off of the back of it, whether it be health related, helping somebody maybe diabetes type 2. We have a lot of those sort of people who just healthy eating is made a lot easier, or whether it's somebody, I don't know, just on their own personal health journey. It might be actually individuals who partners have never cooked before, or their children aren't interested in cooking, but because everything comes in the bag, it's all pre-portioned, they have a step-by-step sort of recipe guide. Actually, individuals who've never cooked before will cook, or they start cooking more often. And then that sort of has that real sense of achievement and pride at the end of it. So that's when people go, look what I cooked, everyone. And then, because we have a nice community, everyone's quite supportive as well. They'll put up their own pictures, etc., etc. So I think it's just individuals sort of having that positive impact, having that sense of achievement or pride in what they're sort of doing, and then being able to share that on a sort of wider basis with others who are doing the same thing.
No, I love it. And I to be honest, that it solved lots of my pain points, because sort of my factory setting, I suppose, is fatty with with lashings of gluttony. Like I will literally on the way back from work just go and grab a pizza, or like not even a pizza, just like pasta and just stuff that isn't healthy. And I subscribed to your boxes in January after quite a heavy Christmas, lots of Christmas pudding. And yeah, there's, I suppose it's mindful in terms of what you're eating, but there's also like almost just, there's a mindfulness in just kind of chopping, like it's almost like monotonous meditation. And in that hour whilst I'm cooking the dish, I'm not, I don't know how to sort of explain it. Like, if I get a pizza and whack it in the oven, that's 20 minutes. I'm just going to be on my phone, right? But by parking my phone and just putting some music on it, it's mindfulness. Mindfulness manifests in such way more ways than just a plate of food, and that's something I really kind of appreciate what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I think we live very much like people with similar ages to ourselves, slightly older, younger. Everyone's on their phones the whole time. You can order food straight away, have it delivered, not have to do any cooking. But actually there's a real, as you say, mindful element to the actual cooking process, especially if you're following a recipe. Now, going to shop for a recipe is time consuming and difficult because you don't know where all the spices are in the shop. You don't know if they've got X, Y, Z. But actually, when you have it all delivered and it's made so easy, actually you just go, okay, where are my tomatoes? Okay, what's the step? I've got to chop those. Where's my spring onion? Chop those. What sort of sauce do I do? So you're looking through it all, and the process of actually eating starts when you see the ingredients. Your digestive system actually gets activated as you start looking at the different colors of food, and as you start smelling the different sort of flavors that come from cooking and things like that. When you salivate, all that sort of thing, that's actually the start of the digestive process. So that's really interesting as well. But I'm 100% with you on the mindful element of just chopping, following a recipe, not being able to think about other things because you're in the moment, which is really nice in this day and age where this conversation right now is all set up via technology and we're online the whole time. So actually being able to take that sort of break, if it be for half an hour, and just cook, and then also have that when you've cooked something, you take a bit more time and notice over eating it. If you just order a pizza and it gets delivered, or a takeaway meal or whatever, bang, to your door, thank you very much. Or you pop it in the oven, take it out, bang, back to what I'm doing, TV, phone, whatever. You don't really talk about it. When you cook the meal and you go, oh, that's an ingredient I've never used before, or this is a teriyaki salmon, never had that before, whatever it might be. And especially if you're sharing a meal with somebody, you go, oh, do you like that? I'm not sure. It wasn't my favorite. Last night I preferred this one, or yeah, oh, maybe I do love that one. We'll favorite that next time it comes around. You know, you talk about the meal a bit more. So it's not just the cooking element, it's also the eating element afterwards, which is really important because we've lost a part of that, you know, as a sort of society where you see children on iPads or eating different meals, etc., etc. We're not really talking anymore, and it's a nice way actually to connect.
No, definitely. And I'm just sort of thinking out loud now, but when I would just get like a pizza or just whack some pasta on, if I'm on my phone, I'm actually literally scoffing it. It's almost like the speed of the internet is the speed I'm scoffing. Like, but I think it was like your chicken rosti with tarragon and an egg. I think it was like a couple of weeks ago. One, that is something I'd never cook, so it ignites this creativity in your brain. I was like, I would never think of putting chicken like in an actual potato thing. I was like, that is so banging. But when you've taken time to eat it, you actually to cook it, you take time to eat it, and that is, yeah, as I say, like why I revere you guys so much is you're bringing back that moment of, yeah, well, literally mindfulness in people's chaotic days. Where I want to jump to now, and it kind of does tie into this almost mindfulness piece, because lots of founders I've interviewed on this are super driven. The next thing. And one of the guests I interviewed was Roger Wade, who's the founder of Box Park, and he said something really sort of pertinent. And he was like, a lot of founders are set up businesses to sort of overcome kind of childhood, sort of insecurities or something like that. And it's something I'm beginning to think about more. What would you say, were there any insecurities that you were trying to potentially overcome, and that's given you this kind of relentless drive with Mindful Chef?
I'm not sure about insecurities. I think we've all three of us have had parents who have either started their own businesses or, you know, gone on to run their own sort of thing. So I think in that sense, you've always been around individuals who have gone and done it. So you probably had that in the back of your, and whether it's worked or not is irregardless, you know, and that whole sort of feast on failure, sort of MVP startup and just see how it goes mentality has always been there. But I think equally, it's also just probably sparked something to go, oh, do you know what? You can just give it a go. And other people have done it. And actually, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But we'll go and do it. I don't think there's necessary insecurities there. I don't know. I can't really speak for Giles and Rob, but you know, from myself, I don't think so. It was more a thing of I'd worked for myself for many years and didn't really fancy working for anyone else either. And actually, the opportunity to go and start something with a couple of friends, which could be far bigger than we'd ever be able to do individually on our own or within other companies, was you know, something really exciting to go and do.
No, definitely. And I think maybe that was the phrase Roger said, but I think it's maybe a different word. It's kind of like almost trying to get into the why, or the understanding the bigger picture of why you guys could do it. And I think if all your family members have been there and done that, you've got that almost this kind of self-belief through school, whatever, like, yeah, we can do this. And I think lots of founders or people who are potentially setting up the business trying to leave that safety net of maybe a corporate job. It's a very hard thing to cross that chasm. But I think with you guys, if your parents have done it, it makes it not easier, but it gives you the belief to do it, I think, is what I'm learning.
Yeah, I would also say we're not stupid individuals either. We all, well, I hope not, but you know, we didn't leave our jobs straight away. We carried on working. Myself and Rob worked for the best part of 12 months doing both jobs. You know, so I'd go and train clients 35 hours a week. And then when I'd finish sort of after lunch, I'd come and meet Giles in the office or at the warehouse and sort of pack and do the rest of the business. Or I'd be out going around the streets of London at the time with our little Mindful Chef box, talking to gyms, Pilates studios, yoga studios, etc., going, can we come and talk to your members and tell them about this new thing that we're trying to create? So, you know, in that respect, we didn't just jump and go, oh, okay, let's just put all our eggs in one basket. We went, okay, we think we've got an idea, but we have to be smart about this. We're self-funded. We haven't gone and raised a lot of money. So we haven't raised any money. So we have to be really careful about where we're putting our financial resources. So actually for us to stay working at the same time made the most sense. And then when you get a bit of traction to go, okay, if we really want to try and take this to the next level, now we do need to jump, and we need to get on, or we need to jump on and get on the ride properly. And that was the sort of inflection point of going, okay, what's the worst that can happen? You've got to go and you got to go back to your old job, or you've got to go get a new one. Fine, we'll be able to do it. We'll be able to get something.
I think listeners, well, because again, lots of listeners may be in a job, and I think what you've said there is so pertinent about almost creating, I think you've just mentioned it earlier, the MVP, like the minimal viable product. Like, is this a thing before you just throw everything into it? And yeah, I think that's brilliant. I think listeners, it's timing is everything. Like, make sure there's enough of demand before you just jump. And but I suppose what I was trying to dig at with the insecurities question is, you're all grafters, like all grafters. I've listened to so many podcasts of you like working 7 days a week, 7 p.m. on a Sunday, getting all these calls, customer complaints with like Black Friday in November. Like, you've got this work ethic. Would you say that's come from your parents, all your parents? Like, where's that come from? Because it's astounding in my eyes.
Oh, thank you. Nice you'd say. Well, one, that was out of necessity. We didn't have other people. So if you're not picking up the phone like to customers after a driver's thrown it over a fence, or picking up the phone to suppliers to get an order in, or order's been delivered somewhere else, then nobody else is. So one part is necessity. For Rob and Giles, I can't speak for Rob and Giles. I think it is probably through family as well, and sort of their backgrounds in work, and always being dedicated and wanting to progress. And actually, nobody's afraid of hard work, like you say. For me personally, that I know I get my work ethic from my mum. Like, unfortunately my dad passed away when we were 16, so my mum had to work several jobs to keep us at school. There's 4 of us, so there's a lot of outlay anyway, just on mouths to feed, let alone schooling, etc. So always worked several jobs, whether it be beginning in the morning all the way through to the evening, and then at weekends as well. So I think having seen that and understanding, well, if she can go and do that to provide for, her family, then actually, having to work 7 days, having to work on a weekend or whatever, or a bit later to try and get our business off the ground that we're passionate about, then it sort of makes sense. And it's not going to be forever, or at least you hope it won't be forever.
Yeah, sure.
And there will be some sort of end point to it. In the early days, you could never see it though. You'd hope it was coming.
And what jobs was your mum working to kind of help you guys through?
Oh, all sorts. She was part of a really well respected sort of property development firm in the early days, but then equally, she'd be she'd be sort of involved in cleaning, all sorts of things to sort of make ends meet, whatever it be, to sort of provide for the family. So, and that also has instilled in myself and my brothers and sisters, there's no shame in any sort of work that you take on. Like, if you need to provide money or provide things for your family, then you'll go and do a job. And I've done all sorts of jobs over the years, from all sorts, working sites, do cleaners, like bar work, all sorts of things. And it's where you meet amazing individuals. You take real pride in some of the work that you do, you get end results, etc. And sort of that's instilled that real sort of work ethic and sort of pride and sense of achievement in sort of the outcome of your work, I guess, as well.
No, I just thought it was fascinating. I wanted to kind of unpack where it came from. I completely agree. I suppose in terms of, I actually wrote an article about this. I started when I left uni delivering cheese around London, based in Battersea. And obviously all my mates were on the grad scheme, and I was like, but it taught me so much. It was like, I've got to be in Battersea at 5 a.m. It like taught me how to graft, but at the time I couldn't see it, but these things linked up, which now kind of, it puts you in good stead. Cool. So where I want to go to now is hiring people. It's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing we've gone through at Money Life. It's the hardest thing every listener sort of this podcast is going through. It's like, how do you hire people that are, one, the right skill set, 2, align with the brand values, and 3, have enough kind of cognitive dissonance, i.e. like new skill sets to bring something new to the mindful party. What is your kind of hiring process to get those three things right? Is there a specific set of interviews or questions you ask that unearth? Because outside looking in, it seems like you've managed to get to 130 people. Most people listening to this are not nowhere near that. So I'd love to explore that.
Yeah, and they're like two very separate journeys, aren't they? Really, one, you've got like sort of, you know, sub 40, I'd say, sort of team, and then you've got sort of the inflection point of like 40 upwards, and then you've got like over 100. And I would also say we didn't have anyone involved in people or HR until we were about 70 odd. So we were probably behind the curve. So we've learned a few lessons. But I guess in the early days, interviews were exceptionally informal, with myself, Giles, and Rob. And you know, when you're much smaller, sort of 10 individuals, yes, you might, if it's a really specific role, like HARE was a videographer, right? Because we thought back then content would be king, queen, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, it'd be where we could really shine and tell amazing stories about our suppliers, our product, etc., and build that relationship and connection with the customer. So that is a specific skill set, right? But then obviously we also had to find an individual who was willing to take a bit of a chance, a bit of a risk. They might not earn as much money, probably going to be younger than somebody with lots of experience, but actually, are they really hungry to improve their own skill set? And are they hungry to sort of join a bigger mission and be a part of something a lot bigger? So we lucked out and got a great individual in the early days who actually also improved his own skill set because we needed to shoot food photography and we couldn't afford a photographer. So we said, well, how hard can it be? Point and shoot. You do the videos already. And it obviously is very different, don't get me wrong. And he managed to improve his skill set though. So actually when he left Mindful Chef and went and joined another fantastic company that he actually went on to, Riverford, he actually joined as part of the photography team. So actually he wasn't even doing videography anymore. He actually moved on to photography. So he managed to build his skill set up. And then in terms of like wider field in the team, then you're just looking, well, we were looking for really hungry, smart individuals. One being, you know, a girl called Olivia, who's actually our sort of, well, she'd been like our third hire, who actually had won a competition on Instagram to win a Mindful Chef box. I remember delivering it to her when probably only had 60 customers. And then lo and behold, she sort of reached out for an internship with us. And, you know, she's exceptionally bright. She's been with us ever since. And actually she didn't have a specific set of skills per se. She didn't have much experience, but she had a broad range of, you know, basic marketing skills, or, you know, she was a good communicator, so she could help us with customer care. She was smart, so she could help on operations if we had anything there. So really it was broad set, just finding really smart individuals to bring into the business who could potentially help. And then as you get bigger, you know, now we have a great sort of hiring process. Actually, you know, we've got a fantastic people team. You know, we've got a couple of recruiters, and then internally now, and then we have sort of our head of people and then a people manager under her. And you know, that now we get to go and find some really great individuals, and sometimes they might need a bit of work in terms of okay, they might not be the finished product, but we think actually if they come to Mindful Chef, they'll be able to learn really quickly, because guess what, we give you a lot of autonomy and ask you to do a lot more than you might get in other companies. And then the process is a lot smoother now. You know, they'll chat with that team first, and then they'll come and chat to sort of the managers. And then the one difference, I guess, or to your point of how do you get it right or try to, is at the end of that, they'll also meet with one of the founders and Tim, and actually we'll also look at like, do they fit culturally? Do we think they'll really fit in with Mindful Chef? And are they going to be able to either adapt their approach, or do they have that approach already to fit sort of a fast scale up sort of growth mindset, please?
No, I mean, that was amazing. I think there's just so much in that for listeners. I think, again, I suppose most people listening to this, I suppose what you said there, it's like you're almost looking for this growth mindset. It's like, are you willing to learn, constantly grow, get better, like your videographer. Suppose you're looking for a self-starter. So Olivia, she reached out to you. So I think for people trying to hire at the super nascent stages, it's like self-starter. And this growth, I think growth mindset's really, really powerful. What's Olivia doing now then? Is she, because obviously now there's 130 of you guys, like what's employee number 3 doing? I'd love to know.
Yeah, so well, she really wanted to build up her sort of skill set in marketing. So she's responsible now for all of our sort of social media channels, our content strategy across all of those channels as well, and actually has individuals who work with her and underneath her. So she's managed to progress, and that's equally hard when you're a smaller company as well. You don't have lots of levels, or if you're trying to keep headcount down, you're not always bringing in people underneath others. So it's finding that balance to where people can go and what they can do. But yeah, she's been a fantastic sort of team member throughout, and actually also very passionate about the service, passionate about sort of the wider approach and mission of the business, and equally everyone in the community knows who she is as well, because she shares that passion with all of them. So they'll all know who Olivia is by sort of name as well.
Mate, yeah, because I think the original kind of the nucleus of the team are the ones that build the culture. When say you Giles and Rob aren't there, they're kind of like the people who keep it going. And on that kind of, we talked about the growth stages in terms of employee headcount, I suppose. Basically every guest I've had on this podcast has always said, and it may be different for you guys because your recipe boxes, they've always said 0 to 1 million is the hardest bit. That's like the graph. As Paul Graham says, it's like the trough of sorrow when you're just like in the weeds, and it's kind of hell on earth. I heard Giles reference that for you guys, the kind of the turning point was this 7 million mark when you guys hit there. I may be wrong, but I would love to know, when you guys hit that 7 million mark or around that inflection point, I think small brands can put in systems that can be amazing and they can really speed you up. But equally, too much kind of dogmatic, inane systems can kind of slow you down. It's just process for the sake of process. What are the kind of the 1 or 2 systems you guys have put in place, and that could be within customer service, team, etc., that have really kind of had a cataclysmic shift in Mindful Chef? I'd love to kind of look into that.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? I mean, we're still as founders trying to get out of the weeds and move to becoming better leaders and coaches more, to really empower those individuals underneath us. People talk about it as like the dance floor, and being on the dance floor and then being up in sort of the eaves watching down. And it's like, as a leader, you need to know when to be on the dance floor, when actually to take a step back and sort of just oversee. And we're still very much trying to get better at that and do a better job to really empower the team. I don't know. When we were at 10 million revenues, we still only had 10 people in our head office. So we were very small. So in terms of systems, we had an amazing sort of in-house back-end technology platform that we built ourselves that allowed us to, all the chefs to sort of input ingredients, it would come out costings, be able to order, do forecasts, all sorts on there. So that really took a lot of the heavy lifting away. Customer care, we always had a fantastic team led by sort of Siobhan from those sort of days as well, who I think we've managed to put in some really good systems and automate a lot of things to our back end as well, that allow us to keep that team relatively small and also provide a really excellent service. But I think we haven't put lots of online systems in. We didn't have a HR platform for lots of years. We had a very basic one which we implemented and all of that. And actually, I think it's people. People make the business better. And if you can have really fantastic individuals who can own their areas, and you're always going to get involved as a founder or entrepreneur anyway, but if they can own their areas and run with it, and have that sort of growth mindset to problem solve, etc., the likes of Siobhan, the likes of Olivia, likes of like Gaz, who used to sort of own the sort of operational warehouse side for us, then they can take your business to a certain point before you start to put in more and more processes as you get bigger. As I said, we're always playing catch up. We got to 40, and then the pandemic hit and we were 90 overnight, and we didn't have any HR team, you know, or a proper onboarding system or interview process. So you know, then you start to put in, and we're kind of still playing catch up a little bit with all of those things. But luckily we have some really good individuals beneath us who work fantastically well within their own teams in their own right.
No, I think that's what you said there is so reassuring for, I suppose, myself and for listeners. I think there's this kind of rhetoric that you need to put in X system and X process at X stage of the business to move forward. But what you said there about actually, like, if you just get the right people who you trust, you don't necessarily need the systems. I think great systems will help if the people aren't great or aren't amazing. But if you've got amazing people, the systems aren't necessary, is kind of what I'd...
Equally, when you're like smaller, like, isn't it easier to just pick up the phone or just walk over to somebody who's 5 yards away rather than slapping them a message, or opening up another, I don't know, Asana project to type up something when you could actually go get the answer from them straight away. So I think there's definitely times and places, and when the teams get bigger, you need to have more processes so that people have visibility and accountability across the board. But when you're small, like, actually processes can hinder progress like quite a lot, and it's a lot of work for the sake of work, when actually we think, you know, as I say, it's that value of being personal. Like, you should be able to just go and talk to your colleague, your teammate, and actually you should be able to get an answer really quickly, and you should be able to problem solve really quickly, and then actually come up with a solution. And that's far easier than, you know, popping on Asana and ducking back out, closing it. So
I know it's like this meeting for the sake of meetings. I can't stand it. No, I love that. And one of the values you've mentioned is unafraid, and I really that really struck a chord with me. And I suppose what I want to talk about now is being unafraid of your competition. Because I've got a big belief, one of my staunch beliefs is, like, you don't need to focus on your competition, really. You need to be cognizant of them, but just focusing them is just going to cause like incessant anxiety where you're not making decisions based on your personal value system. Giles mentioned that obviously with some of the other recipe boxes, that's actually a really good thing for you, because if people want to find a healthy box, they'll find Mindful Chef. How do you guys kind of stay unafraid of the competition? Because obviously there's more and more recipe boxes coming out. There's more, I'm assuming Gusto and HelloFresh have got bigger bolster of budgets. Like, how do you do that, I suppose, as a leader, and kind of manifest that in the team as well?
Yeah, you would assume right on the budget point. Far bigger, like stratospherically bigger than Mindful Chef and the others. I think you're right to be sort of aware of what they're doing and what new things they might be doing, because if you do gain traction and customers and awareness, then obviously the bigger players are always going to try and replicate it in one form or another. You know, I think HelloFresh and Gusto have both tried to bring out sort of healthy aspects of their sort of boxes. More and more companies are becoming a B Corp, like Mindful Chef. Both HelloFresh and Gusto have recently certified. You know, we've been a B Corp since 2018. So they sort of see these things and replicate them. And obviously that does sort of, you know, will take some awareness away from your own service. But I think, and equally new recipe boxes as well coming onto the market, see what Mindful Chef have done potentially and go and replicate. That was something when we started, we didn't just want to be another copycat of Gusto and HelloFresh. We were very focused on actually nobody's focusing on, nobody's delivering sort of healthier options of food. So actually let's really double down on this, and actually we can also be a sort of business for good at the same time and use our community on a wider societal environmental sort of aspect. And you see more and more brands and companies trying to do that now. But I guess it sort of, you know, encourages us on. You see others trying to replicate, you go, okay, well, we must be doing something right then. And actually, how do we build upon this now? But like you say, I think you've got to just focus on your own company, what you're doing, be aware of others, but actually focus on your niche, your USP, what you're trying to do, and double down on your efforts.
No, I love that, because I think it's so easy, especially on, well, actually, you guys are now in supermarket shelves. Congratulations with the Waitrose partnership. It's epic. But I think, I suppose, from a challenger brand getting onto a supermarket shelf, you just constantly look at the category. And I always believe, like, don't look at your category, because you're just going to start looking like your competition. You're just going to turn into your competition. I really don't. I kind of don't agree with that. How has the Waitrose, because that's such an epic like partnership, how's that all come around, I suppose?
Yeah, so we've spoken to Waitrose for sort of a number of years, actually, last sort of 4 or 5 years. It's a really obviously premium brand. There's a lot of synergies between the values we share as companies, and sort of our belief systems, and also actually sort of our belief systems around suppliers, etc., and our customers. So for us to be able to work with Waitrose, could only be beneficial for Mindful Chef, really. Equally, there are benefits for Waitrose in terms of D2C online ordering, bringing more people to websites. That's a big part of supermarkets, where they're still trying to understand how all of that works. For every pound they take out of the bricks and mortar and put into online, they're sort of losing it from their shelves. So they're still understanding that balance. But awareness, about Mindful Chef, because Manny Life obviously works for Mindful Chef, and you're in that sort of sphere within sort of being London based and everything else, and health and wellness. But there's lots of people still across the UK who've never heard of Mindful Chef. Lots of people still haven't heard of recipe boxes. That's the great thing that the big players do, is they drive awareness of the category, and then people find out more as they go along, but it's still very small. So actually partnering up with Waitrose, not only is it good for the business, like alignment on values and synergies with customer bases, but equally it actually allows us to really drive awareness of Mindful Chef as a brand. And then sort of our big sort of our baby will always be the D2C. That will be the bulk of our business, but actually we think our big mission has always been to make healthy eating easy. So this just takes it one step further. There's lots of people who won't have heard of us, or are a bit scared of the sort of ordering online or having to order a subscription. So actually they can give us a go in the supermarkets. They can get a sort of frozen meal or whatever, and then get to taste the recipes themselves. And then actually they might go, I'll give the box a go. So we're really happy to be in sort of Waitrose as a first step. And we always said, Mindful Chef, the logo actually used to be mindful with a line and then chef. And we were always sort of aware that we could potentially do a lot more. It could be mindful shop, mindful restaurant, mindful deli, blah, blah, blah. And it was always the idea to sort of build our brand into a lot more than just recipe kits as well.
Really? I did not expect. It's now makes sense. It's a stroke of genius, because I suppose it's almost like it's commercial marketing. So obviously you're literally making money from the sales of the recipe boxes, of the frozen meals in Waitrose, but then it's also driving awareness back into. Yeah, that's genius. I don't know what I can impart on listeners, but I think it's just thinking how you can almost like maximize each sale, I suppose. And like, conscious of your time, I just want to kind of, there's a few things I want to kind of explore before we wrap this up. So you guys sold to Nestle in, was it, or sold part of the business to Nestle in November 2020. What did that feel like for you guys?
Yeah, so it was a majority investment. So interestingly, myself, Giles, Rob, and other leadership team haven't actually sold any shares. So it's a bigger belief for many, but actually we actually haven't. So haven't benefited personally from the deal at all. But the great thing from the partnership and relationship is sort of twofold. One is, we've done 2 big rounds of crowdfunding. We had probably close to or over 1,000 investors, of whom many were family and friends in the early days. And it's very rare that any startup or company can return those sort of monies, even more so at a good return. For a lot of companies, it's like 1% will actually make it or whatever. And actually a Mindful Chef journey, especially being fresh food, as we said, it's a really hard business. Lots of people can just start a recipe box up, but actually getting it to scale is really, really difficult. especially with the margin sort of based around fresh food. And there's lots of ups and downs. And we've been there in times where we've been in the pub, we haven't been able to pay ourselves, and we've just paid the sort of 4 individuals working for us. So we know what it can be like and sort of how hard it can be to raise money. So actually, to be able to give all of these ambassadors, family and friends who sort of invested in Mindful Chef and really believed in us in the early days when there wasn't much, to be able to give them a return was actually really important to us. So actually that was one amazing aspect of the deal, was we could do that, and not many companies can say that. And then the other aspect was talking about those ups and downs, was being able to guarantee the future of Mindful Chef, you know, being able to work with one of the biggest sort of food brands in the world, actually secured the sort of stability of the business, I guess. You know, as I said, we've got 130 people now, you know, as founders, having been in situations where you've gone, don't know, you know, what could happen next week. If we don't crowdfund tomorrow, then these people will be out of a job, and you don't ever want to really be in that situation again. So that allowed that. And then also the big mission, as I said, is to make healthy eating easy. And, you know, I did that as a personal trainer, nutritional coach on a small level. With Mindful Chef, I've managed to do that on a lot bigger level. And now with the Nestle partnership, we're going to do that on an even larger scale than we've ever been able to do before. So from us, it's a really positive impact that we'll be able to do and drive awareness of that mission, of our products, and how we can actually have that positive impact on people's lives.
No, I love that. It almost links back to what we were saying at the beginning of like passion plus solving a pain point. So you've done that on a micro scale, literally being a nutritionist on a one-to-one basis. Then in my opinion, you've like almost done that with Mindful Chef, like it's humongous. But then to even take that passion and pain point of making everyday eating like accessible, I love that. And I think for most people listening to this, if you can find your passion plus the pain point that you want to solve and just dream big, like you're a stellar example of what can actually, you know, happen if you put your head down.
Yeah, I would say, Dan, though, I would like highlight back to, we never thought that companies like Waitrose, like Nestle, would be interested in working with Mindful Chef either. And in the very early days, the reason we had to do 2 rounds of crowdfunding was because no institutional investors wanted to get involved. Couldn't see how we were different from the big players. Didn't think we'd ever be able to survive. You know, thought we would quickly run out and you know, dissipate within the first sort of year or two. So, you know, the play wasn't, oh, let's go and build this business and sell a chunk of it here or here. Like the play was always, okay, do we have a good idea? Can we grow? Can we get more customers? That's it. It was always just getting to the next step. And then these things came at the end. We didn't set out with a goal of, okay, we're going to go and sell this company or sell part of it to X, Y, or Z. That was never from the beginning. It's just that's the journey that Mindful Chef has sort of gone on, and where we're at this stage of our sort of life cycle.
No, sure. I suppose what I was trying to say is like it always started with making healthy day eating, you know, accessible and easy. And then over time, as you've scaled, these things have kind of come into your, into your stratosphere, which have allowed that to scale up. But it's always, I suppose, starting with your mission and keeping it true to your, I suppose, heart in many respects. And where I want to kind of wrap this conversation up is, again, kind of going back to this mindfulness and basically mindfulness. Because I think, as we were discussing, everything, especially everyone listening to this, it's so go, go, go. I need to get this listing or do this or sort this problem out. It can be really hard to have these moments of mindfulness. And on your Instagram, I saw this really kind of set the curiosity fireworks off. Is you said, you know, happiness is a choice, was in your Instagram. And that was really pertinent to me. So speak to that, please. Like, how is happiness a choice? Like, how is that a choice? And why is it a choice?
Yeah, I mean, I don't always get it right. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, sure. None of us do. We're humans.
Yeah, I guess it's, you always have a choice you can make. I'm a big believer in, unless something is absolutely fundamental for you to respond in this instance, it can probably wait. And there will be instances where that happens, you know, big problem with deliveries, customers, whatever it might be, that you have to deal with. But a lot of the time things can wait. So actually, if you, I don't know, want to go and take a walk, you want to go and train at this time, or you want to spend time with your family and you want to take a morning maybe, or finish work a bit earlier, or, you know, live life in the moment. Maybe you want to go take a long weekend, be like, oh, I just shouldn't. But these are all choices that we can make, you know, and yes, there is always going to be another thing you can tick off for work, but actually what is really important to you, your values, your personal circumstances. You know, the other morning I wanted to walk my daughter to work. You know, actually I had something quite important I really had to do, and actually it would have been far better for me to have stayed and done that. But actually at that time the sun was out, daughter really wanted me to walk her up to school. I was like, yeah, no, I'm just going to do this. I'll figure out a way to make that piece of work. I'll get it done. It will be fine. I'll figure out a way to do it. But it's just small choices like that, you know. I don't think it has to be anything grand or really big. It's just actually what are you doing day to day that makes you happy? Because ultimately, and especially in startups where it's always go 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 and there's always problems, you've got to find those moments to find sort of self-fulfillment as well and be happy with what you're doing. Otherwise you will burn out, and you know it's not sustainable sort of in the long run.
No, I completely agree. And I think lots of guests who have come on this podcast and people listening, they do eventually hit a burnout. And I think the burnout comes is by not thinking of this happiness as it's a micro choice, but these little micro choices on a daily basis compound and they actually stop burnout. Whereas I think what burnout really comes from this kind of, it manifests with this need to do more, anxious when I'm not doing enough. And it just this vicious cycle, where it just goes round and round and round. And then bingo, you're like, you have to take a huge time off. So I love what you said there about it's okay, it can wait, or like just take the walk, like the sun's out today, like yeah, I probably should take heedance of your advice, Miles. And I kind of on this kind of happiness point, you've done a lot of work with Fern Cotton, who's, I mean, she's got, I think is it called the Happy Place podcast? Yeah, she's done a lot of work on this. Has she taught you anything that you've either implemented with yourself, your family, or with the Mindful Chef team about cultivating this happy place or happiness as a choice?
I would say most importantly, or what I've taken away from Fern, two things probably. One is there is no one-stop shop that fits all. And what I really like about Happy Place podcast and what Fern does is she speaks to so many individuals across a whole breadth and range of different things, whether it be some of the best composers in the world to Professor Green, to somebody who talks about breathing, mindfulness, painting, whatever it is, cold water therapy, all these different things, all the way through to some people have written some amazing books. So, and really it's unlocking sort of different habits or understanding what some of these individuals do, and then being able to potentially apply them to your own life or actually change them to fit you. What somebody else does doesn't necessarily work for you, but you might be able to take something from it. And I think that's really nice, because when we think about mindfulness, or a lot of people, they switch off because I don't have time to meditate, or I don't have time to do that, and it's very one track, like sort of centered, one channel, but actually it can be so much more than that. And it doesn't just have to be this really extreme thing like I want to go jump in the sea every morning. It could be, if that's what you're into and you're close to the sea, great. But for others, it might just be something, it might be taking 5 minutes while you're making your coffee, to actually just take a step back, put your phone down, think like about yourself, maybe slow down your breathing, something like that. So I think Fern's really sort of allowed me to see that. And then also considering how busy she is, actually to focus on taking the time to try and implement that into her day-to-day life as well, because she's got several children and then all these different time commitments as well. But equally on top of that, she tries to find time to, as it comes back to that point about finding that sort of self-fulfillment within to ensure you don't get burnt out, or you can actually live a more positive, happier sort of life as well.
No, I love that. And I think everyone listening to this probably should turn this podcast off and just like go on a walk. Just kind of final question then, mate, just out of curiosity, what are some of the systems or habits you put in place in your week? Because obviously you've built this huge business, and it seems to be like go is one part of our conversation. and the other half is like, how do we balance that with some mindful strategies, I suppose? What are some of the ones you put in place other than literally getting a mindful chef box and turning everything off?
Cooking, yeah, exactly. Cooking is definitely one. Like, I think because you have to do it. Or like, you know, you don't have to, but like if it's there, I will do it. And for me, it's exercise, and that doesn't have to be, you know, full gym blown session. It could just be getting out for a walk, like we've said, like being able to get out in nature. And not necessarily, if you can find a park, obviously great, because it's a bit nice than walking along the roads, but roads are fine, you know, but just getting outside. My wife will tell you, if I don't get to exercise for a few days, she can tell you straight away that there's something wrong, because I've become a bit of a pain. But it's just being outdoors really for me. That's the main thing. Sort of grown up with, and sort of what I enjoy most doing. And then obviously I can find sort of a moment of solitude also playing with my children. I've got two little ones, a 4.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and obviously they can be difficult and tiring, but equally you can find real moments of sort of mindfulness when you're just spending time with them and really focusing and being in the present, I think.
Amazing. Well, Miles, thank you so much. I suppose I've loved this conversation. There's just so many kind of parts to it, and I think a lot of it is this values. It's finding your values as a business and your values as yourself. And in terms of business, it's about building something brilliant that's true to you. You know, whether that's being unafraid, being personal, and then I suppose on an individualistic basis, it's like having your own values to make sure you are mindful and you don't burn out. And I think there's just so much in that for listeners. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Dan. It's great to catch up.
Awesome. So just hit